session of our June sheep and goat production marketing workshop. I'm Jennifer Lutz, and I'm from the University of Missouri Extension, and I get the privilege of introducing our guest today. Dr. Yisu is, say hi, Dr. Yi. She is our PI on this project, so she's pulled this all together and kept us all in line and enabled us to bring this research to you all, which I appreciate. Dr. Dan Quadros is with us. He is from the University of Arkansas, and he's going to be talking to us today about how nutrition really affects the meat and how we should feed these animals to develop some good meat on these animals. And Dr. Salinas is with us today from Lincoln University, and he is going to be helping us put it all together, how we can get some of the most out of our seasons, out of our breeds, out of our crossbreeds, and all of that sort of stuff. I do want to say, if you're new this week, you can find the previous sessions on YouTube, and this session also will be posted to YouTube sometime later this week, probably. So if you've missed anything and you'd like to go back and take a look at some of the stuff we've done, we've worked on marketing sheep and goats and what our consumers really want, considerations for supplemental feeding and how we might go about doing that, and then we'll have this session here this afternoon. So I will let you get started, Dr. Quadros. If you want to go ahead and share your screen, and you have control.
Thank you so much. How does my screen look like?
Looks great.
Looks great. Good to hear that. So good afternoon, everyone. So thank you. Appreciate so much the invitation. And it has been amazing, this webinar series. So thank you, Dr. Salinas and his team. Amazing. And our topic today is a nutrition management and its direct impact on meat quality. So instead of talking more about nutrition part that, pretty common to see webinars about that, so I decided to study directly this impact, how to manipulate nutrition to have a different end product. This is the main message that we want to have here. In our presentation, we're going to encompass what's meat quality, factors that impact meat quality, and finally, and most importantly for our presentation, be the impact of nutrition on carcass traits, on the nutritive value of the meat, and sensory attributes. And open at the end for questions and answers in a panel with Dr. Salinas. So what is meat quality? And it's very subjective, actually, and I'm glad Dr. Apple, in his first, his webinar, during this webinar series, he covered a lot, and I don't need to, do it again. So I'm glad he did all the introduction, pretty much leaving for me the nutrition part. But just to understand, and I like this pyramid, and that quality nowadays is much broader concept that we, used to understand as meat quality. Start with adequate supply of meat, but I would say affordability is another thing, right? Price will be important. So quality and price. Wholesome, fresh, free of disease, intrinsic qualities, flavor, color, texture. This is something that we're going to be talking today about that more specifically. And some extrinsic qualities like welfare, sustainability, public health, social impacts, and other things like that. Overall, what's meat quality? So meat quality is an overall acceptability of a meat product to consumers, encompassing sensory traits such as tenderness, juiciness, flavor, as well as nutritional value, safety, and visual appeal. And it's determined by a combination of visual markers, chemical properties, and production practice. So it's linked to perceived quality and customer satisfaction. So that's a very broad concept again, with process control, product testing, and some certification standards like grass-fed, organic, some sustainability certification, some social impact or commitment, safety, quality, and sustainability. So let's say meat quality is our main target here. And Dr. Apple, during this presentation, he covered everything here. So we start with the animal, with the genetics, with the species. Obviously, we are working with two different species, sheep and goats, different species, different responses of production systems. We are talking about meat production systems here, and breeds and slaughter weights, everything gonna affect. And once you slaughter the animal, you harvest the animal, how about the cut? How about the muscle and the part of the muscle that you are evaluating? It's gonna change everything in terms of quality, handling, and environment in terms of the animal on-farm practice. Diets, that's our main topic here. Other factors like type of parturition, if it's like a single, it's like a twins, environment, pre-slaughter condition, slaughtering method, post-slaughtering, in market and consumption. And our main topic here will be diet. And we don't talk about diets. So we start with the water and the main nutrients for the animals. Energy is the main one, the number after water, the main nutrient. But in terms of the dry matter of the feed, energy will be the first one in terms of demand that comes from carbohydrates, structural carbohydrates, that's part of the fiber of the plant, and non-structural carbohydrates, that's starch or sugars. And we have protein, very important part. And after that, fat, that's going to be converted in energy too, and finally, minerals and vitamins. So this is the main thing. But our approach here pretty much was how the nutrition system can impact our meat quality. So I will go, my comparison going to be grass-fed versus confinement versus grain-fed lambs and kid goats, right? And goats. And Dr. Salinas is going to talk much more about that, but when you have breed in the component and nutrition, we have an interaction here pretty strong. I would say is the strongest interaction for your result from in terms of producer. And as a working extension, although we are more, our presentation will be more towards the customer, the final product, the end product, but how about your pocket? It's going to impact. So a good nutrition for a bad genetic. So a genetic that's not going to convert the feed in muscle is not going to work. Unless your feed is super cheap. The cost of feed is very important. But if you have a better quality feed, if we invest more in the feed and have a good genetics, now they're going to respond. The same way, if I have a very good genetics, potentially can transform all the feed muscle with a good conversion, with a good feed efficiency, and I have a bad quality feed, they're not going to expose the genetics. So this is very important to be understood, and I think is one of the most important take-home messages here. I see a lot of producers here in the state and all over my career, and they starting buying animals all over that are available in the region. They don't produce their own animals, so they're starting buying all lambs, all kid, goats available, whatever genetic they find, and bring to a feedlot. And sometimes they don't respond because the limited genetics in terms of that. So ideally, when you have a good environment, you're supposed maybe to have an agreement with some producers, maybe test some crosses, because for the producer's perspective, they want first the animals, survive in their hands, to be adaptable to the situation, to the condition, to the region first. And after that, they're going to think about carcass, about meat quality. So first is if they're going to survive, is they're going to be adaptable. But for the good environment, doesn't matter that much the adaptability because they're going to be fed, in the grain, in the feed trough, directly in the feeder. So this is a very, very important. So think about that average daily gain. When I want a good feed, and I have a cost for that, and it costs more than forage when they start feeding grain, it means that the animal needs to respond. And I need a good genetic for that. In feedlot, if you don't gain at least, let's say half pound per day, it's kind of a target. And I see results on the literature here, sometimes a quarter of pound per day. So the producer needs to be very, very careful about the feed efficiency, how much I'm feeding, how much costs my feed, how much my animals are gaining, what's average daily gain. Final weight here minus the initial weight, so two different dates, have the different weights, and divide by the number of days. Basically, how much they are gaining per day, in average per animal in my lot. So if I have a 10% of the animals gain a lot, converting very good, but 90% of the animals are not converting enough, my system will not be feasible. So think about that, the cost of feed efficiency, and average daily gain. And what happens now, go directly to the carcass. I'm talking about the system now. Now, let's go to the carcass. Evaluate the carcass. Slaughter the animal. Dressing percentage. Fat back thickness. And other parameters. And what happens when I go from the forage to the left here, forage to the grain part, to the right. In sheep and goats, what happens? Increase growth rates, increase average daily gain, more nutrients available, higher digestibility. Concentrate, we call roughage and concentrate. So on the left side will be the roughage, the forage, low level of energy. When I compare, like a bale of hay, maybe gonna be a couple of pounds of corn, for example. Because that we call concentrate is the energy, the nutrients, the protein, they are concentrated in a smaller volume when I compare to roughage. So because of that, they're going to increase the growth rates, increase the average daily gain. And how about the carcass traits? They're going to increase shrunk live weight, that's the weight right before slaughter, hot carcass weight, cold carcass weight too. That's after 24 hours in cold storage. And dressing percentage. That's very important that I have the live weight, but after that, what's the real weight? That's very important. And you receive for the meat, pretty much. You receive for the carcass. This is the producer is paid. So it's very important for us to understand that because we have more nutrients. And actually, if you have a pasture-based system and introduce supplementation on that, yes, we can finish lambs, we can finish kids on pasture, not only in confinement. And we can see differences or improvements on that. At the end of the day, it comes to economics. You're going to see all my presentation, most of the things going to be towards the advantage to grain fed, to confinement, to supplementation, even on pasture. So it comes down to costs, come down to economics. What kind of feed are you using? And nowadays, we have been researching and searching for alternative feeds. byproducts, agricultural byproducts, sometimes residues from feed processing. This is what we're looking for today, not the main product. We want to, most of the times, as a nutritional background that I have, is pretty much replace high costs traditional feeds such as corn, soybean meal, a source of energy and protein, respectively. Substitute that for more non-conventional feeds, cheaper feeds, and keep the performance. This is our goal. Nothing always is possible, but this is our idea. For instance, dry distillers grains, cotton seed, whole seed, cotton whole seed, cotton seed meal, all these alternative feeds that we are trying to introduce in our system. And they are very welcome most of the times. They respond very, very well. Another important point here that not only the grain, but in the literature, and most of my presentation is based on these two review papers, two pretty much recent 2023 review papers. So these authors, they review, a lot of papers to get some conclusion. This was what I'm trying to bring here. Not go one by one, but overall, what's the results? And the idea now, and I defend that you, producer, you need to be self-sufficient to produce your own forage. And to be, in terms of management, pasture management, and forage production systems, try to have as best forage as possible through management. Management is a key. Rotation, species with better nutritive value, introducing, for example, these animals. We are reaching the summer. Summertime is critical, not only because the heat stress, but the low quality of the forest. Bermuda grass, Bahia grass on the south part of the southern US, pretty low quality forages, and the animals, with the heat stress and everything, they're going to reduce a lot the performance. Instead, I could use to have a boost on my nutrition, natural things like a pearl millet, sorghum Sudans and Sudan sorghum and other crabgrass. And during the fall, during the spring, I have small grains, oats, ryegrass, triticale, and I can use the legumes. Legumes are amazing. And we still have a monoculture of grasses. This is a main thing that I want you guys to think about that and improve your own system and save concentrates. If I have more energy and more diet, more digestible diet with more nutrients from my forage, I'm going to save in grains. I'm going to save in forage that I pay, and it's a lot because feed costs represent 70-80% of my recurrent costs. More on the meat part now. So starting the lumborum here, and having now evaluating in terms of meat color. And I remember Dr. Apple's presentation that so the producer, they're going to choose the meat visually. So starting eating with your eyes. So meat quality, meat color is very important. So these Longissimus do Lumborum in a trial before at Texas A&M, so we kind of chop it and evaluating the color is a colorimeter here. And basically some parameters like lightness, lower is darker, redness, higher is preferred, and yellowness, lower is preferred. Okay. And if you see here this photo with the colorimeter in this trace, is simulating one regular retail display that we find in a supermarket. And you leave the meat there, simulating a retail store, and starting measure pretty much every day, sometimes for a couple of weeks or more. Starting measuring what happens over time when you have this meat. So going from the forage system from your left to concentrate, what happens with the meat color? They're going to enhance the redness of the meat. They're going to enhance the appearance of the meat. Why that? Well, this reflexivity caused by high-fat deposition in animals fed on concentrate diets, maybe is one of the theories behind that, and more physical activity and lower energy intake, resulting in lower slaughter live weight under grazing conditions. This is what the authors explain what happened. Tenderness. Tenderness is one of the most important sensorial parameters that we have and linked with customer satisfaction, right? And we use the tenderness for us is negatively correlated with the Warner-Bratius shear force. What's the force pretty much that we use to cut the meat? So it depends on several factors, including pH, intermuscular fat, collagen contents, and muscle fiber length. Another parameter is very important that I want to talk about the parameters of that, the effect of nutrition on that is juiciness. Obviously, the way you prepare going to affect, right? Rare, medium well. But in terms of composition, this strong positively correlates, there is strong positive correlation of juiciness with water holding capacity. Water holding capacity, so it means higher water holding capacity, higher juiciness of the meat. In negative correlation with drip loss, water loss, and cooking loss, that we don't want that pretty much. So now putting both together, tenderness and juiciness. What happens when I go from the forage to the grain? It reduces water Bratius shear force. It increases water hold capacity, reduces cooking loss and dripping loss. What means it's going to increase going from the forage to the grain, basically from the pasture, 100% grass-fed to 100% confinement, increase tenderness and increase juiciness by reducing the fiber content in the muscles, strength of connective tissue going to be lowered, disintegrating myofibrillar proteins and connective tissue, all of which increase this water holding capacity. Flavor is very complex subject here. Our tongue, we have pretty much 5 senses here: bitter, sour, salty, sweet, and umami. And maybe a sixth sensor here, like if you remember something from the past, our previous experience, maybe can be, but in the game, but we have pretty much 5 senses in your tongue. So what happens to say, okay, this is tasteful, this is delicious, or I like or I dislike, gonna be pretty much the aroma, the odor, the aroma, the flavor comes from pretty much the aroma. And if you see sheep and goats here, start from the top left, you get the muscle. The muscles, you have these adipocytes. Adipocytes, you have the intramuscular fat, and the intramuscular fat is composed by fatty acids. And these fatty acids, pretty much the protein doesn't have a lot of impact on taste, but the fatty acids, the profile or the composition of these fatty acids, they are the ones that going to mostly impact the aroma, the odor, and the flavor of the meat. And we have some factors, is not unique here, meat qualities, but even this flavor, we have pre-mortem factors like nutrient levels, like nutrition, like a breed management, sex and age, breed species, and post-mortem factors too. And we use some techniques, for example, the sensory panels. We put the meat there, train the panels to respond these questionnaires. I'm here quite simplistic in this questionnaire just for you to understand. The last methodology that I used, we had 18 different parameters in terms of sensory analysis for a panel, a trained panel to receive different samples and test and give scores, right? But nowadays, as a scientist, we want to go further on this study. Why that? Why? How we can correlate this aroma, these chemical compounds formed when I grill a meat, and the consumer satisfaction. So the forage and pasture diets typically produce a richer, more robust, and sometimes gamey flavors due to the presence of specific branched chain fatty acids. On the other side, grain-finished diets, we reduce this gaminess in the flavor, a kind of a mild taste. And now, as a scientist using like a gas chromatographer here, using like to measure these compounds that are released when you put these lamb chops in a grill, gonna release, and what happens, we try to capture these and analyze. And it's quite complex, this analysis. You can see this disc with these other compounds produced by lipid oxidation of sheep and goat meat. So you see in the center here the chemicals, and again on the second circle chemicals too, and what kind of aroma. And we have 400 olfactory receptors in our body, and recently there is a research pointed out that a human can smell about 1 trillion different combinations of senses in terms of other compounds. So it's pretty complex. And what happened with the flavor when you have the grass fed? Again, comparing grass fed with grain fed. Pasture normally enhances the flavor compared to concentrate fat. Why? Because they reduce this series of chemicals here released that are associated with this mutton flavor. However, conversely, they're going to increase this pastoral flavor in grass-fed, as I said before. More gamey, more pastoral here. This is something very important when consider your consumers. For some consumers, this is detrimental. For some consumers, they don't mind, they don't care. So think about, if you're doing direct market, who are the consumers? And I have been thinking a lot about that, because that last time I think I teased about, should we be discussing that, or should we ask the Australians and New Zealanders what they are doing, that as we import 3/4 of the lamb meat consumed in the United States is imported, and half of the goat meat comes from other countries. But it's very important. I mean, for us, if you have what kind of, and nowadays here in Arkansas, we are pretty much almost 100% selling live animals to ethnic populations, to ethnic markets. And they don't even wait until the animal finish. So be discussing what's the point the animal gonna be finished with, 30% of fat in the entire body, with the fat back thickness of what. So discussing that is very important for the conventional market. But unconventional market that we export is ethnic market, we have other traits, other things they are looking for. Like Kentucky animals, if it's halal, if you follow their, talking about Muslims, for example, in other religions, they have their own thing. In other populations, they have their own preferences. Africans, Latin Americans, Jewish, Christians, or whatever, or Muslims. So I'm talking about religion, I'm talking about the origin of these groups, the populations too. So two things kind of come together, they unified here. What's the impact now on the meat composition? Obviously, the meat needs to be delicious, affordable, but nutritious too. In between sheep and goat meat, we have the difference for sure with the goat meat, with leaner meat than the sheep. Total protein, well, slightly difference in fat, yes, more fat in the sheep meat. But when reading all these papers, nutrition, over the years, and I have been studying, yeah, we can find some difference here and there, but in protein, not that much. In protein, sometimes find that pasture more protein than confinement or vice versa. So we don't have a consensus. We don't have something that you can point it out are going to be more or less. However, for fat, going to be different with more fat and a different profile depends on the system and towards the confinement here. And now comes to the fatty acids. And I mentioned before, the fatty acid is the most important in terms of taste. I know that it's complex here, but as a nutritionist, what we are trying to do now is manipulate the diets to have a different end products. And we are trying to have a healthier meat on the table. What means, in other words, in terms of fatty acids profile, decreasing saturated fatty acids or SFAs, the saturated fatty acids, that to have more correlation with health disease, like heart attacks or strokes or other cardiovascular diseases. On the other side, our target is to increase polyunsaturated fatty acids and sometimes even monounsaturated fatty acids and have this relationship. What's the relation between, for example, SFAs, that's saturated fatty acids, with polyunsaturated fatty acids, or PUFAs, or PUFAs, or MUFAs, or monounsaturated fatty acids. So it's proven that if I decrease this relation between SFAs and PUFA and MUFA plus MUFA, so if I decrease that, it means increase these unsaturated fatty acids is going to be beneficial for the overall human health. And this we are trying to do. However, for our health here, let's step back a little bit. For our health, you go to the doctor and you say your cholesterol is high, they call it good cholesterol, bad cholesterol. Okay, put some, fish oil in your diet, right? Some flaxseed, olive oil, don't eat, fried stuff. So all these things, when it come to ruminants, is not that simple. It's not that simple. Because when it comes to the rumen, they change completely the initial profile of the fat that you're feeding. So I have a healthy oil, for example, here, feed my ruminant, they're gonna biohydrogenate there because that the ruminant meat in general, beef, sheep, or goats, they have more saturated fatty acids. And over the years, and watch some seminars, I remember I was watching a seminar and the guy talking a lot about that and let's do our best here, test different feeds to increase, to have a healthier diet or healthier meat. But all these increase, sometimes the guy just joking say, well, if I had a canola oil, I spoon all my research here, baby, if I take one pill of fish oil, gonna be more than everything that I'm eating, my meat, with all the advances that I have in nutrition. So this is a fact, but still we are pursuing a healthier meat as a great source of energy, protein for us in terms of human. And we are testing this oil sources, different oil sources. That's a lot of variable here on the left. Some forage, it's variable according to the forage, according to the grain. And now we want exactly to have these health benefits on the meat. And what happens when I go again from the forage-based diet to the grain-based diet? I'm going to increase intermuscular fat content. This is a fact. And decrease fatty acids composition. What's decrease the quality of my fatty acids? What means to have more polyunsaturated fatty acids here? Yes, pasture-based, we have the advantage on that. Would be considered healthier if you eat in a moderate way, or gonna be healthier. This is important. This is grass-fed beef or grass-fed lambs, and it's something that you should consider when you sell your meat, right? Some folks, they are more inclined to buy, when you buy from a small producer that's a grass-fed, they see more sustainable, I guess. So this is the main thing. So think about that when we talk about the meat quality, fatty acids composition. Okay? And as a final considerations here, in the quality, if you think about the consumer experience, each cut, each part, we have the preparation too. So it's complex. It's complex. Although I can say, well, I have like a meat quality, maybe, the rack could be great, and the French carré, for example, right? The lamb chops gonna be the greatest, or the leg. These two are the most valuable in the animal, but the other parts, what you're gonna do? So if you know how to prepare, gonna be as delicious as the main cuts. So it's important to have this final consideration here. Another thing is about, again, the message of your system. Do your best to manage your forage and to have to be self-sufficient, to buy because grain is easy to go there, the feed store, and purchase grains. But the forage part, that's the one that we need to take into consideration. Any supplementation systems will be very important, because I can invest more on my forage part and use less grain and achieve the same good results. This is the main message here. So I'll come back later for the discussion, and I'll leave you here for Dr. Salinas.
Thank you, Dr. Quadros. That was very interesting. I think I would be interested in reading those studies as well. Dr. Salinas, whenever you're ready. You're muted.
Okay. And do you see my screen? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so interesting, Dr. Quadros. I just was remembering when I was living in Mexico, we have a field day. And after the field day, they have this like a lamb carcass on a grill complete. And in another grill, they have like a goat meat in pieces. And the tenderness of the goat meat when it's like a probably 8 months old is not very tender. So, but that meat was so great that they say, hey, what is happening? How do you how do you cook it? And they say, well, our trick is to be like making like a boiling, like for 1 hour the meat, and after with salt and everything, and after that we just took the pieces and put on the grill. So with all the grease and everything just burning was so delicious, and was like a without like cooking before. So I think it's very important what you in the way that you finish your presentation about all the recipes, and I think we should be bringing more about that. So I will be talking if I just to say that depending where you are located in United States, as Dr. Quadros was talking about the grasses that you use as a base for your pastures, as most of the people like pasture-fed, grass-fed animals, and also will be anyway the base if you have feedlots also. So it's very important to be talking about the cool season grasses, the transition zone, where here in Missouri mainly we are, and the warm season grasses. Just remembering that the warm season grasses, the quality, the nutritional quality is less quality than the cool season grasses. So depending if you are spring or fall with the cool season grasses, here in Missouri, for example, the quality will be much better than during the summer. So, and this is important just to know, because as we saw this in the introduction, in the first talk now in June, we are like with all this production system. I like to be talking about the production system, because you have all these different alternatives that generally you will have in your farm. You will have all these cool season grasses like the orchard grass, Timothy grass, festuca, and will be producing much during the spring than during the fall, but we'll be having all these grasses. In the summer, the cool season grasses will be almost not producing, will be not dying. Most of them are perennial, but you will be having the warm season grasses. And as Dr. Quadros said, you can have some good alternatives like a sorghum almond or some others that will be increasing the quality also during the summer. And you have the annual and the perennial legumes that are very important to be thinking about this, but the management, probably you can be seeding, but after 3, 4, 5, 7, 10 years, some of them are disappearing. So you should be just seeing how you manage your pasture. And the main problem also is about the winters. We have here 2 winters, 1 year, another year. So the hay feeding is so important because the quality of the hay generally is not very good, and you will have problems with the nutrition. And so always, especially for goats, but also for cattle and for sheep, the force and the browsing are so important, especially in the woody areas. And the nutrition of many of those plants and brushes are so high in protein that are so important for the animals. So all this integration is very well, but how do you match, it's like a matching of all the nutrition with the physiology of the animal? I remember Dr. Quadros came here 2, 3 years ago for a field day talking about nutrition, very, very good talk about nutrition. And so very related to the reproduction. Okay, so also Jennifer Lutz is talking very much about the prices of the market. So I stole all these ideas and I put together this diagram because the best prices, as Jennifer Lutz present often, every year she takes the prices from the markets, generally are like a February, March, and for selling the animals according to the market. And the other prices during the summer are not so good. So, but generally to be selling the animals is like a 2, 3 months old. So to have 2, 3 months old here the animal, that means that animal should be like a lambing in September, October, and not like the main lambing that is during the spring. Most of the farmers, they have their lambing or the kidding during the spring, and because the natural breeding of the estrus of the animals, the natural breeding is in October, November. So October, November, 5 months later, they will be lambing or kidding for the goats. But to sell them, you cannot be waiting like 9 months, 10 months. Probably there are some markets for that, but not for the best prices. So how can you be managing all these And it's about reproduction, about nutrition, but also, as Dr. Quadros was saying, about your pocket. So you want to sell also. Now, if we introduce in this other factor about nutrition, so the nutrition and the preference of the people. So we did this study, very modest study here at Lincoln University, but we could publish this paper just this year about the preference of goat meat, beef, or lamb on the grill, the same kind of meat. And we found that most of the people, they were preferring like the goat meat, probably because had a lowest fat content among the evaluated meat that we had. And so the people like it very much that. And they were, in this case, only like a seeing the meat cooked already, grilled already. So they didn't see the color, things like that. And so they evaluate the tenderness, the flavor, and some other attributes, and they liked it very much. So this is important because depending on where you are located, there are specific target markets that they will be looking for. Just to understanding, like Jennifer Lutz has said and Dr. Quadros, that many of the meat that we can get from goat and from sheep is coming from Australia, New Zealand. And probably from the talk of David Collier, like I think it was last Monday, was a lot of grain that they are using to the animal that they export to US. So I think the talk of Dr. Quadros is very important just to be thinking about this. The other factor is about the crossbreeding or the breeds that we are managing. So generally, we are talking about the paternal effects. So you are receiving some inheritance from the father and some others from the mother. So when we talk about crossbreeding for a terminal animal is where you will be not using for reproduction, but you will be selling those animals. So in the crossbreeding, for example, in goats, you have a boer paternal effects. You will be looking for faster growth rate, more masculine, heavier market kits, better carcass conformation. But you have Spanish, you are looking the maternal effects, so it's adaptability, strong mothering ability, better browsing ability, greater survivability. So all these are important for some system productions. So also, for example, boer crossing with Kiko. So the father the boer, the mother the Kiko. So generally, you will having the paternal effects, improve carcass traits, increase body mass, rapid finishing ability, and the maternal effects will be parasite resistance, strong maternal instinct, good milk production under pasture conditions, lower maintenance requirements. So you will be having some benefits over there. So the idea is that you can having these animals to be producing like a meat, but at the same time with some resistance. So typical goals are like a growth hardiness, muscle parasite resistance, material efficiency, meat rates, lower maintenance, heat tolerance growth. So according to what you are looking for, and also with experience. So now when you're talking about boer, you have to be considering that you will have difference between boer. And when you're talking about Spanish or Kiko, also you will having like a different kind of animals, like the ability to be producing. So we share this scheme. We are going to send the presentations to all the people so you can be looking for a little bit better with more time. We don't have much time now, but just again, here is talking about the paternal effects and the maternal effects, and why are you trying to cross one to another. So also when you are crossing two animals, you have the hybrid vigor, heterosis. So it's like in the corn, when you have a corn that is hybrid, you will be having like a better like a production or resistance that the parents and the mother. So that is the idea to be the crossbreeding. Somebody was asking the last time about lamb crossbreeding. So I found some information about practical way to build with maternal effects with Dorset, Rambouillet, and Polypoid. Generally, these use as the maternal base because those breeds are commonly suited for reproductive efficiency, milk, and longevity. So generally, these breeds are used as a maternal, as a mother. And the paternal effects are like a Suffolk, Hampshire, Dorper, Southdown, or Texel are rams for terminal sires. Yeah, so because these are commonly cited as for growth and carcass quality. So as we can see here, you can have all these crossbreed lambs, the Texel ram with polypi. You will have the maternal effects of the polypi, very high fertility, excellent mothering ability, good milk production, strong lab survival. Like from the Texel, you will have excellent muscling, large lawn, high learned meat yield. But for example, with you want some resistant to parasites, you can use as a maternal the Catadine, and you can have Dorper. And there are some others like Dorper, Dorset, use and Suffolk rams, and some other like a Rambouillet or some like a paternal effects like a Hampshire. So all these things are important, but again, will be depending of the quality of your animals. As Dr. Quadros was saying, if you want to be producing tenderness and you want to be producing meat that will be looking for a good like a specific market, has to be matching like the season of the year, the nutrition, the and also the breed, as many other factors. But this is very important. So you need to be fixing that. Now, if you are working for direct market, so will be a little bit more flexibility if you are like selling frozen meat after going to the butchering. So that is the idea, just to be closing this webinar with this information, and just to remember that we have these talks in the YouTube channel, as well as we are going to be having some others winter certificates that we have had during the 3-4 years. So I think that's it, Jennifer. I don't want to take more time.
Thank you, Dr. Salinas. I don't actually see any questions in the chat, which always makes me a little nervous. Did we do well and cover it all? Did we go too hard? I don't know. I always get a little nervous when there's no questions. So if anybody has questions, please feel free to put them in the chat.
Yes, a quick comment here. Something that drives me crazy when I go a lot of producers direct market, and they say, well, my first one product is ground meat. So it's ground lamb, or, grinded the entire carcass. I say, what, man? So, we have very noble cuts. I mean, these animals are amazing. And just to see how a market is. We got a lamb burger put there. So we need to work on the consumer education too. So I want you, producer that is watching, be your main advocate for your own industry. So if you invite a group of friends, get your best lamb. Don't get a co-ewe or a animal for that. Try to serve the best because age is important, right? If it's intact or castrate. So everything is part of nutrition is important. Environment, genetics, as Dr. Salinas was saying. So try to educate producers too. Do your part, and we are trying to do our part. Probably we don't have a lot of questions exactly because it's more on the on the consumer side or more on the meat quality is something that sometimes the producer wants to have more on the production part, I'd say. But very interesting, Dr. Salinas' models for off-season breeding. And
Yeah.
this is a model that we want to study more here.
I always think it's really interesting too how, based on our own perspectives and the own lens that we look through, right? What we see as the constraints. It changes for everybody. Our production, livestock production, our nutrition, the economists, right? The marketing piece. Like we all have our own pieces that contributes into this. So I think it's interesting that we look through different lenses and see different boundaries that need to be worked on. There is a question. Has there been a study about what types of forage help flavor meat?
Yeah, yeah. And about flavor was reading something that I have been working, like legumes with some plant secondary compounds. We have been work with condensed tannins a lot to reduce parasites and to increase feed efficiency. If we have a lot, it's gonna constrain or reduce intake. That's not a good thing. But if it's balanced, could be impacting in the rumen, your fatty acids profile in the rumen first, mainly this relation between acetic acid and propionic acid. These are two that are very important. They're going to affect the color of the fat. That's something that in the pasture they have more. I mentioned that less fat, but better profile of the fat. But the fat's going to be yellowish, like if Irish butter. Why is kind of yellowish and American butter is not? Because it's a grass-fed cows. The same thing of the meat fat. So yes, the type of the forage I mentioned about the legumes and quality in general, they're gonna affect. Because if you increase in energy and protein, they're gonna quite uh, kind of meet the requirements and you don't need the grain even with your forage. But specific about type of forage, yes, the legumes. And other things may have a off flavor. Mainly some, weeds, some plants. This is a very
Garlics and
important
onions and
sometimes. Absolutely, yes.
yeah.
And when use carbon byproducts is something that we have a limit to use that because may affect. So each feed needs to be carefully studied, but definitely, yes, we can affect the meat quality with the forage too. It's not as pronunciated as compared forage and grain. It's more pronunciated the difference, but in the forage, yes, we have differences.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thought. Martin and Martin mentioned that they think that the focus on high prices for ethnic markets that want a small, more traditional carcass has lessened the uptake and use of meat quality information. And maybe that is true in certain localities. There are definitely different parts of our country that have more connection with ethnic markets. But that's not true of all of our industry by far. We do have some industry that sells sheep and goats into very formal commercial markets, and they go from the farm to the feedlot to the slaughterhouse, right? We do have those markets, but they are fairly regional around the United States.
True, and when you talk about ethnic market, it's broad. As I
It
said, the
is.
Africans are different from Latins, they're different from Arabic countries, Middle East people, and etc. So it's very important to consider that. And another thing about the conventional, I'm fighting with the chefs. And why then you're fighting? with the chefs because I mean they want sometimes the animals to reach 150 pounds just to have, you know, the
Big
the
portions.
the rack, the portions like a
Yes.
this size, and it's not gonna happen when you have a light carcass. And we need to think about the producer. What's the efficiency in terms of feeding them grain, increasing my costs, just to have a better, bigger cut because they sell a lot of lamb chops and they are beautiful. All the photos that you're gonna search online gonna be, you know, the big roundy lamb chop, and it's not efficient. It's not sustainable for the system. So you need to rethink what's the chef want. Maybe use it two or three instead of one. But what's the chef want? What's good for the producer? What's good for the chef? Well, if they are paying for, that's fine. But I mean, do you think the system is sustainable? Is a food for thoughts.
Yeah, we have a question about the processing cost, and we had a very good talk. I think was last winter, Jennifer, about taking decision of your cost of processing. If it's better to go for a direct market with the cost of processing or just to go for the action, for your best action sale. So I think we can share also all that information. We can put together all the different webinars that we have related to meat processing and so the way that the people may be looking for all these talks. So I think we are over time. Sarah Glendinning have the fall, and so you want Sarah and also to talk about this book processing that we have.
Yep. Our raffle winners from last week were Sue Berryhill, Katie Albert, and Sibtain Ahmed. And I went ahead, since this is our last one, I got our winners from this time, which was Christina Amos, Tina Fatros, and Emily Holter. So you guys will receive an email from me here shortly, just kind of outlining, congratulations on winning a book. You get to choose between 3 different books. So just send me an email back with your selection and a good address for me to ship the books to. We also have been keeping attendance for this webinar series, and I think we decided if you've attended 4 out of the 5 webinars, then we have another book that's on adding value to sheep, goat, beef meats, and chicken. It outlines some butchering, processing, regulations, and marketing, and we'll go ahead and send those to you guys if you participated in 4 of the 5 webinars.
Now, if you missed any of them, you can go to the YouTube channel and just to watch it and to say, hey, this is my summary, this is my story, and to send that to the email that I have over there, and we are going to be considering that you watch the 4 of the 5. Yeah. Okay, so probably we are going to have some others. We are going to have a field day here in Missouri. Jennifer, do you want to say that it's August 7?
It is August 7th, yes, in Southwest Missouri. It's going to be in Mount Vernon, Missouri. And we're going to be at our MU Research Center, which is kind of nice. We've got some sheep out there at the farm and some nice facilities there. And that day, we're really going to be kind of going through a management intensive grazing system kind of idea for specifically sheep and goats. So that'll be neat. And then Homero has one coming up shortly after that, right?
Yeah, September 4, we are going to have also, and we are going to have Famacha fake counts. And also October 24, we are going to have 23, sorry, 23rd. We are going to have another here in Calvert Farm. So we are working together with MU and also with Arkansas University, University of Arkansas. So thank you, Dan Quadros, Dr. Quadros. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. Appreciate.
See you next time, guys.
Thank you, everyone, for participating. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Quadros.